Kia ora and welcome to the niggliest, niggly niche cast. I am the Duda Doc, joined by the Wildcard here for the niche cast. We are here to talk about Steven Adams, Aotearoa's finest basketball player export, because we also have Sean Marks running things for the Brooklyn Nets, and we might get onto Sean Marks, you never know. This is a Steven Adams episode, but if we're talking about Kiwis in the NBA, it would be rude not to touch on Sean Marks. As always, if you're enjoying the niche cast, if you're enjoying the niche cache, jump on Patreon. The link is in any description box. However you're absorbing this content, the best way to support the niche cache is on Patreon at the moment. If you've got any other funky ideas of how to support the niche cache on Patreon, hit us up. We're all ears. Wildcard. Before we chuck into some Steven Adams discussion, kia ora, talofa, namaste, and I just want to catch your thoughts and ideas on some stuff that I've been listening to recently in terms of along the meditation line of things, and just, I think the phrase is the best way to describe it, and that is allowing thoughts and emotions to pass through you, because you are the awareness of those thoughts and emotions. You are not the thoughts and emotions. You are the awareness that notices, recognizes those thoughts and emotions, and then you are in complete control of what you do with those thoughts and emotions. How about that?
Doc, mate, I love it when we start off on this note. I love it. That's sort of how I learned to meditate myself, I think, is that whole thing of like just sit there, singular minded. We should do a whole episode on meditation actually sometime. But yeah, that like singular focus on your breathing. And the dude on the app would say, like, after, he's been silent for a minute or something, he would say, and if a thought happens to be coming to your head right now, just don't fight it, let it arrive, just brush it aside gently. And it's sort of like that, like, just let it pass through you, acknowledge it, don't fight it, but don't get caught in it, I suppose. That's specifically while meditating. I think what you're saying is more like broader, like just general, any old time the thoughts come through, don't be defined by them, but like see them, follow them through, etc. I think that's what you're getting at, is it?
Yes, and meditation is the tool to get you into that zone, because it's been really prevalent in my life recently, having returned to Auckland.
Ooh,
which brings with it a whole bunch of thoughts and emotions just settling back into day-to-day Auckland life. And it's not really anything different to where I was before, what I was doing before, but the thoughts and emotions are different. And so suddenly you're dealing with different thoughts and different emotions, and it's the practice of recognizing those thoughts and emotions and then releasing them, just letting them be on their way instead of letting them fester in your day and carrying thoughts and emotions that you had earlier in the day in one circumstance, one situation, and letting that carry on throughout your day. It's just been, returning to Auckland has thrown up a whole new bag of balls, and different balls are different thoughts and different emotions. Many of them are the same ones that I had before any other time I was in Auckland. But then when you spend time out of Auckland, you escape all that bullshit. And then you come back to Auckland and all that bullshit's there again. And you're just like, ah! But it's always good to keep growing, keep learning, and you're better equipped to deal with those thoughts and emotions through meditation, mindfulness, and just beautiful practice.
Beautiful practice is always a good start. I heard on a podcast a while back that happiness is your relationship to the current moment, and a lot of people try to it's a tool in most religions is that they'll promise you happiness in the future, the kingdom of heaven or whatever, and then you get the same thing in like the workforce where work hard now so you can, retire with money in the future. Just give us your 50 best years of, service so we can make more money at your expense kind of thing. And people therefore fall into this trap of thinking that like their reward comes later, whereas your reward is now. Like now, the past is a memory, the future is in your imagination, and the present moment is the one that you have right now, the only thing that you've got, and your relationship to that determines how happy you are, how fulfilled you feel, etc. We're on form today, aren't we?
Roger that, wildcard. And someone who knows what Steven Adams is up to keep that mind sharp, well, and wholesome. But he's an enlightened dude. Like, he's a very smart dude who believes in a lot of interesting ideas and different just ways of living. So it's quite a topical little introduction if we are going to talk about Steven Adams. And interestingly enough, I was recently listening to the Bill Simmons podcast with Ryan Russillo from this week, in which they were talking about making headline news in New Zealand.
Oh, I wish I'd listened to that now.
That included them having a jolly old chuckle that they would make headline news in New Zealand for talking about Steven Adams. But it also included Bill Simmons specifically saying that he was not saying that Steven Adams should be traded. He was merely just throwing up options. Like, that's exactly what he said. And, like, not necessarily defending his remark, but he was just saying they were just running through players and options around those players. So that was just an interesting recent highlight regarding Steven Adams, and obviously the saga that we've had in New Zealand, Aotearoa, with various media outlets just, lazy is one thing, and then being a bit irresponsible, and then just being generally silly in their knowledge and reporting around Steven Adams. And I don't want to talk too much about that because it's just more the most recent kind of activity that we've had with Steven Adams, so I won't ask you about that saga, but I am interested in your thoughts about how Steven Adams sits with the OKC Thunder right now, given a bit underwhelming in the playoffs, and the OKC Thunder were also a bit underwhelming. So how do you feel about Steven Adams and his place with the OKC Thunder at the moment?
Alrighty. Do you think that those trade headlines would have fallen behind the paywall had it been a week later, by the way?
Yeah, which is...
would have been convenient.
Funny.
Yeah, pretty funny. How he sits... well, if you think about it from the trade perspective, because I understand what Bill Simmons was getting at. He was just throwing out an idea, doing what he does as a sports personality, and just thinking about stuff. And there are three basic reasons why they would want to trade Steven Adams. The first one is that he wasn't at his best in the playoffs. As to why that is, I've just written a big old thing about that yesterday or whenever, about, I think it's a little bit not overrated, but overstated, that how sort of average he was. I think he was average in the literal sense of the word. Like, he was just okay. He didn't play terribly. His defensive stats were actually pretty decent individually. They weren't good in terms of like the wider team perspective. While he was on the floor, they tended to get beaten pretty badly in most games, except for the one that they won, in which case he had a massive plus-minus. But that's not all necessarily to do with him. That's to do with like the unit as a as a 5-man team, how they defended, how they looked to play. I think schematically, not an easy series for him when you're forced to switch off those screens just constantly against a guy like Damian Lillard, who was on fire, like 11 out of 10 good from game 1 till game 5 of that series. Like, it's just a lot of things that weren't working. Russell Westbrook's jump shot wasn't working. When that's not going, well, you've got him and Steven Adams, two guys who aren't hitting jump shots. You had Terrence Ferguson, basically wasn't a factor, and if he was, it was a negative one. Young player in the playoffs, like he'll get better, whatever. But Jeremy Grant's first couple games were terrible. He got much better as it went on. But yeah, Paul George had a bad shoulder and was shooting. I mean, Paul George's 3-point percentage was worse than Russell Westbrook's in this series, and that takes some effort. So just as like the starting five as a team, nobody played well. Like, nobody played to their potential. Maybe Jeremy Grant in the last 2 games I think was quite good, but other than that, on the whole, not good. And so you can't just look at Steven Adams and say he wasn't doing well enough, because I think he's a guy who struggles with... He's a role player. Like, let's be honest, no matter what he's getting paid, he is a role player. He is never going to be a top 2 option in the offense. 3rd at best. I think he was more like 4th here, with Jeremy Grant doing quite well as a jump shooter towards the end of it. So what's he going to do? Like, the defense is collapsing in the paint. They're letting Russell Westbrook have every open shot he wants because he can't shoot. So that's fine. That's exactly what the Portland Trailblazers wanted, which means they're clogging the paint, which means that they, aren't letting Steven Adams be a factor in the pick and roll. They're not letting him get his offensive rebounds. He had no offensive rebounds in the final game of that series. So that's a pretty obvious factors going into why he was underperforming. And let's be honest, since the All-Star break, even before that, I guess the last 2 or 3 months, he hasn't been the same as he was in, say, December. So there's a lot of factors going into all that. That's one reason why they might want to trade him, because he was underperforming. Another reason is because the team as a whole was underperforming, and perhaps they just want someone to, some kind of scapegoat, something has to change kind of attitude. And the other one is that he's on a big contract, and they're likely to have to pay the luxury tax again next season if they don't move someone, and they're to be paying like championship dollars for a team that can't make it out of the first round just isn't good business. Now, there are 3 pretty strong responses to those 3 ideas. The first one, so saying that he underperformed, the fact is OKC, they love him there. He is one of the leaders of their defense. He is a high chemistry dude. He's one of Russ's favorites. Russell Westbrook went as Steven Adams to Halloween, to the team's Halloween party a couple years ago. Like, Russ is kicking up a big fuss if Steven Adams gets traded. They love him there. He's a big part of what they're doing. The fact that something needs to change, the second option, that is probably counteracted by the fact that Sam Presti's already come out saying, look, we're happy where we are. We for the first time in 4 years are not having to spend our summer convincing a superstar player not to leave for a bigger market. We have a core of a team in place with Westbrook, George, Adams, all under contract down the line. Sweet as, like, we're happy with this. We're going to keep building on this. And let's not forget that in sort of that December-January range, this team was fantastic. They were beating everybody. They looked like they could make a huge run in the playoffs. A lot changed since then. Adams had a couple little niggling injuries. Paul George busted one of his shoulders, both of them to some degree, but especially I think it was the left one was hobbling him all the way into the playoffs. There's a couple of their role players weren't able to keep up the levels they were at before, but they've seen what this team can be at their best, and I think they're very happy to keep everything together, including Coach Billy Donovan, and just see if they can't do that again next year. And then the third option, the big old contract. So yeah, if they were going to trade someone, Steven Adams is someone they would probably look at, because they can't get rid of Russ. He's untouchable in that city right now. He's the superstar who stayed. Harden got traded away, Durant left, Russell Westbrook stayed. Everything they are right now, a lot to do with Russell Westbrook. So he's untouchable. Paul George is their best player, so he's untouchable. So yeah, it would have to be Steven Adams if they wanted to shed some contract money. Already went into why they probably don't want to do that. By the way, I think Dennis Schroeder is a sneaky one who they might actually look to trade. I think if they can get a cheaper version of him, someone to run the offense for the second unit, someone cheaper than what he's being paid, I think they would. I think they would be quite happy to make that trade, but that's probably not going to save them paying luxury tax. But still, yeah. Steven Adams' contract, sure, you might want to offload that, but think about it from the other team's perspective that would be trading for him. He's a dude going to earn like 24, 25, 26 million over the next 2 years. In each of those seasons, he is an old-fashioned center who can't necessarily play in the playoffs big minutes against every team. We've just seen why that is, because if you don't have the right options around him, he becomes a little bit of a liability defensively if you've got a team who can just, hit open threes and run really fast and do those things that the Portland Trailblazers did, get to the rim, attack him on the switches, all those little factors. Who's going to want to pay that much money for a guy like that? There's probably 2 or 3 teams, and do they have the salary cap room to fit that? Do they have the option, like the trade, whatever you call it, the trade bait to send back in Oklahoma City's direction? Probably not. I just don't think there are going to be... I think if they put him on the block, I don't think there would be many takers for that contract anyway. But it doesn't matter, because Oklahoma City are fine with what they've got, fine with what they're building towards, and they're perfectly happy just to do what the Portland Trailblazers actually did last year, which was the Trailblazers came in as a favored team in the playoffs, and they got absolutely swept off the park, lost all 4 games out in the first round. Bit of a breaking point. Everyone's saying, well, they got to bust this up. Terry Stotts was very close to being fired. There was talk, are they going to trade Lillard? Are they going to trade McCollum? They didn't do any of those things. They took the same core that they had, ran it back this year, improved, got better, learnt from their mistakes, and played bloody brilliantly against the Thunder. So I think that they're, funnily enough, the team that just pumped them in the playoffs is kind of the benchmark now, the blueprint for what they want to do in this off season and beyond, really through into next season. How they want to take this franchise moving forward. Anyway.
So do you believe there is... How much upside do you think Steven Adams has for improvement? Do you see any aspects of his game that he can develop over the summer? And do you see the Thunder making that kind of jump? Because from all accounts, there's been a lot of kind of soul searching done with Portland. There's been some hard decisions made and some hard discussions done. Do you think that the Thunder have that kind of environment where other individuals besides Steven Adams can reinvent themselves to some extent?
That sounds like I have to now compare the leadership of Russell Westbrook with the leadership of Damian Lillard. And I mean, Damian Lillard is like a perfect leader of a sports team. You don't get more like inspirational and the right attitude and all those kind of things with him than him. Westbrook is stuck in his ways. He always will be. But there's a lot of good that comes with the bad that you have, and you just got to find a way to temper things. And Westbrook, I mean, yeah, he took a just disgusting amount of shots in this series, and he missed a disgusting amount of shots as well in this series. But you also got to look at the fact that they just didn't have... First of all, they didn't have anyone who could guard Damian Lillard, and next season Andre Robertson supposedly will be back and hopefully somewhere close to what he once was. That's putting another non-shooter on the court, but it is at least bringing that defense back up to that sort of lockdown model that they had the year before, that they tried to get to at least. I think that's a big factor that would change things. Paul George's health is another big factor, because when they were really dominating, he was playing like an MVP. When he just fell back to mere mortal status, just playing as a normal player, like a normal, very good player, but nothing like MVP level special, not the same. Just not the same for the Thunder. They do need him to take them over the top. But if he had been doing that, then Westbrook wouldn't have had to take, 22 shots a game in this series, so that wouldn't have been such a problem. He could have settled for 14, 15, and, 12 assists a night, and that is probably the best incarnation of this Thunder team. You just need the dudes around them to make their shots, and Terence Ferguson should be better after a year. They've got a couple little options who your younger players who are pushing through. That Burton fella maybe might be a factor next time. I don't know what the deal is with draft picks this year. I haven't looked at them, but probably nothing that you'd expect. But you can always get a 3-and-D fella or two in free agency. You never know. I know they chased Wes Matthews in the buyout stuff mid-season. Didn't get him. He went to Indiana instead, which was a shame because I think he could have been exactly the kind of player that they would have liked. Someone who can play... someone who can defend one of the two best guys on the other team, and someone who can hit open 3-pointers. If they can get one or two guys like that, I don't think they need to have a drastic shake-up or a change in mentality or anything. I don't think they're as far away as it looked in that series, because they did have injuries and they did have guys who just weren't playing at their best, and maybe this was more of a wake-up call. Just what they needed. Don't need to take it beyond that, though. I'm not sure. I think they're not in a terrible place, and it probably is the sensible option just to keep it together, keep going. Steven Adams personally would do very well if he... A lot of people talk about 3-point shots. I think he would do a lot better if he could just start hitting free throws. Would be a start there, Doc.
Do you think that it's more a case of the Oklahoma City Thunder getting better as a team? Obviously Steven Adams is going to have to improve. I think that's a large reason he does a lot of the things he does or doesn't do over the off season is to get better, and he's always working very hard on his game when in the off season to get better. So obviously there are going to be specific improvements. There's going to be areas of weakness that he wants to improve on. But do you think it's more of a case of the rising tide, rising all the ships at the Oklahoma City Thunder? Instead of Steven Adams fixing a few or improving on a few areas of his game, it's more a case of if the Oklahoma City Thunder are better as a team, Steven Adams won't be... he's just going to automatically be playing better if the Oklahoma City Thunder are better. Do you is that the vibe I'm getting from you? It's less about Steven Adams doing things wrong and more about this Oklahoma City Thunder struggling, and then... Because Steven Adams doesn't strike me as the guy who's going to decide games, decide series, but he can be very influential in a team that is playing well.
Yeah, I reckon that's fair. I think that's pretty much where I'm leaning. But it's just it's to go back to the earlier point. He is a role player on this team. He is the third, maybe fourth option in terms of who's going to get their shots up, who's going to take the most shots in a game. It's going to be ideally it's going to be Paul George, who's going to be second, Russell Westbrook, who's going to be third, maybe Schroeder off the bench, maybe Grant if he has a big day. It's not necessarily, and maybe Adams if he does have if he's on form that particular night and there's a good matchup for him. He has the capabilities to score a lot more points than he does, I believe that, but he isn't to use the basketball parlance, he is not a guy who creates his own shot. So you do have to get the ball to him in the post for him to be able to chuck a couple little pivots and maybe drop a shoulder and work his way to the rim. Someone has to facilitate that, and that is Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook gets the majority of the assists on assisted shots that Adams takes. Gets a lot of buckets from offensive rebounds as well, putbacks and stuff, but again, those come from other people missing a shot first for him to be able to do that. He isn't going to be dribbling downhill, going straight to the basket, making things happen, pulling up for a three. None of these things. He does need guys to play well around him for him to be at his most effective. I think it's probably the case for everyone outside the one or two top players on any team who actually get to define those things. That on this team being Paul George and Russell Westbrook. So they both had average nights, average series, so, the Thunder as a whole had an average series. You can't win when your best players are being outperformed by the other team. So it's not like there wasn't a lot that Adams did a lot of mistakes that he made in this series. It's just that if he had fixed those mistakes, well, first of all, that those mistakes are symptomatic of the way the whole team was going, and just the style of that was being played in that series as well, and what the opposition was showing him. But also, like, fixing those things wouldn't have made them win the series. What was going to make them win the series was Russell Westbrook playing better than Damian Lillard and Paul George being at his, MVPG top, form. And that's just, it wasn't what we saw in that series, so it's not what we got from Steven Adams. Blaming him is a little bit like, it's another one of those situations where you're just swatting at the smoke instead of putting out the fire.
I like it indeed. So you're still enjoying Steven Adams and the Oklahoma City Thunder. You haven't fallen off the wagon.
I got a little bit disillusioned at the time watching the way they were going. I was going to write an article called "Do Oklahoma City Thunder Have a Russell Westbrook Problem?" But I think I'll probably can that one now, having worked through the Steven Adams side of things, because they're ultimately they're hamstrung anyway, because they can't trade that Russell Westbrook contract, because you take on Russell Westbrook, you're going to be taking on everything that comes with that. He kind of needs to be the leader of the franchise. So, you're just not going to be able to move that. They can't move him anyway because of how beloved he is in the city. Can't move Paul George because that's stupid. You're getting rid of your best player. Can't move Steven Adams because he's probably being overpaid for the type of player that he is, and that type of player is the type of player which isn't going to fit on every team anyway. And some of the teams that he would fit on, say Utah Jazz, for example, have a guy called Rudy Gobert already in that situation. Houston Rockets have Clint Capella getting paid less than Steven Adams. They don't care. They're sorted. There's a couple teams out there. I think the Clippers are one he would look pretty interesting on. The Dallas Mavericks, I reckon, playing around Luka Doncic would be pretty bloody useful for him. Someone who can shoot from range and also someone who can pass extraordinarily well. One of the few players who would be on a similar scale to Russell Westbrook as a passer, although not quite there yet. Old Luka, he's a young fella, going to win Rookie of the Year. But yeah, there's a couple of teams he would look good on, but just right now the Thunder are they are what they are, and they don't have a lot of wiggle room, so they're sort of committed to where they are anyway. But I think it's there's a lot to be said in the NBA for just like working on yourself. Don't go looking for the quick fix, the free agency type thing that's going to take you from 0 to 100 in one swing. Just make improvements. Stay steady. Trust the guys who already have a relationship with each other on the court and off the court. Just keep it simple.
Indeed, that's wise advice. Keep it simple. Who are you more interested in these days, Steven Adams or Sean Marks?
Yeah, it's always been Steven Adams, but right now probably is Sean Marks. Coming into the off season, this is Marksy Marks' time to shine, and for the first time ever that he's been at the Brooklyn Nets, they have their own draft pick, which he may or may not use. We'll see how that goes. But more than anything, they are a legit player in free agency. And, they're going to get some chats with guys like Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard. Jimmy Butler, perhaps even, would be another one that would go quite well in that team. They've got some important business to take care of, and it's going to be very fun to see how they go, because I reckon Brooklyn is a pretty legit free agency destination right now. And a lot of players, even superstar players of that absolute peak caliber, would want to play for a team like that, who have a young core of impressive players, therefore are on the rise to get better and better over the next couple years, who have like a great culture, a very good coach, a general manager who'll storm into the referee's locker to defend your team out there. There's a lot going for Brooklyn right now. Plus, it's what a hell of a place to live.
Well, by all accounts, like if you got an NBA salary, that is, not if you're
sure, right.
One of the old school Brooklynites, you might be struggling there.
We're talking upmarket Brooklyn, yeah.
So how would you reflect on this season for Sean Marks? Because prior to the season starting, it's kind of extraordinary where the Brooklyn Nets sit right now largely thanks to Sean Marks. Like, credit to the people who appoint Sean Marks. Credit to the people who Sean Marks has appointed in other roles. Credit to the people that Sean Marks has played a huge role in recruiting. So it's really kind of crazy that Sean Marks is the dude who has led this Brooklyn Nets team into the playoffs.
I think I'm right in saying that the Brooklyn Nets have the biggest range of scouts in the NBA, which would make sense because they seem to be the kind of franchise under Sean Marks' general managership where they don't cut corners, and they didn't have that luxury. They weren't allowed to cut corners because they didn't have any draft picks, which is draft picks exist so that the worst teams have access to the best incoming players in order to keep a level of competitive nature going on in the league. So the teams who are at the bottom have an easy-ish avenue back to being a successful NBA franchise, and they didn't have that. And therefore no one wanted to play for them as free agents. No one was going to go sign there, particularly just because they thought they were going to, anyone who's serious about a championship is going somewhere else. And they just steadily built it up and did the right things, hired the right guys, got coaches who could improve players, looked for players who were valued elsewhere. And what is the most incredible about the fact that they're back in the playoffs is that it feels like they should have been out of the playoffs for a decade, with just the absolute rock bottom that team hit. Feels like they shouldn't have made the playoffs for a decade. It was only 3 seasons. It was only 3 seasons that they were out of the playoffs for. To get back in there that quickly is unbelievable. And, I mean, do you think, the Steven Adams thing, what's his bloody name? Bill Simmons says just a silly little comment on his podcast speculating about Steven Adams maybe getting traded, and it's headlines on all the major media outlets in New Zealand. Sean Marks does what he's done with the Brooklyn Nets, and do you think he's getting anywhere near the credit in New Zealand that he's worth? Because it doesn't look like it to me. Right
now, he's one of our best sporting exports in the world,
for sure.
And that's always stretched out further than just players. Like, if we're talking Kiwi sporting exports in the world, no one's done a better job in their most recent season than Sean Marks.
What he's achieved with that team and turning them around so quickly is I don't want to say unprecedented, because there's a lot of history that I probably am ignoring or forgetting, but it almost is unprecedented because the situation that they found themselves in, I'm pretty sure, would be unprecedented, where someone traded away their own draft pick for the next 5 years. I think there were 2 pick swaps in there, but because they were swapping with the Celtics, that was meaning they're picking in the high 20s. It wasn't exactly like a consolation prize there, when they should have been picking in the top 5. Just no one's been in that situation before, and so there was no blueprint either. It's unprecedented almost from an NBA perspective, let alone from the fact that this dude is from New Zealand.
Once again, New Zealand, the best KG for KG sporting nation in the whole wide world.
Yeah, funny story on that. During the World Cup, you remember when Croatia made the World Cup final, the Football World Cup?
Yep.
I saw a story researching something along the lines where Croatian sports media were talking their country up as the best KG for KG sporting nation on the planet. And honestly, Doc, I just had to laugh. Fair play for the football team, which is fantastic. But
no other nation has the width and depth of sporting excellence, KG for KG, than New Zealand. And I think New Zealanders are sleeping on that fact. It's kind of taken for granted to some extent.
There are a lot of sports in which New Zealand has, even if it's not a major team or whatever, there's at least 1 or 2 players who are just super competitive on a world stage, which that can't happen in many other countries of a similar size, surely.
Well, not even that, just the amount of teams we have in the top 10 internationally. Both hockey teams are top 10. The cricket team, top 10. sure, these aren't world-renowned sports, but New Zealand is among the best. Like, certainly top 10 rugby league, certainly top 10 rugby union. You can go through any sport and there's a New Zealander or a New Zealand team in the top 10. Like, we've got Joel King, squash, top 10, rowing, cycling. All these sports, there is a New Zealander or a New Zealand team in the top 10. And that is undeniable.
It's like the old Olympics thing, with per capita, medals per capita. But, there's a thing to that.
There is a thing to that wildcard, and that thing is New Zealand, Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, being KG for KG, the best sporting nation in the whole wide world. And we are here, representing, talking through. I mean, we're here throwing up the idea. No one else is talking about that idea. So if you don't like what we're saying about sport, at least you can respect the fact that we've just brought it up. The best sporting nation in the whole wide world, wildcard. That is us for Stephen Adams discussion. I'll be back early next week with a rugby league wrap. We'll be back early next week with a whatever we feel like. I don't know. What's on your agenda the next few days, wildcard?
Ooh, I mean, the first one that springs to mind, Wellington Phoenix, maybe?
Sounds good to me.
Would you a Warriors one again at some point too?
We are indeed, wildcard. We'll sign off there. Kia ora. Kia kaha. Cheer. Peace and love. Just stay positive and be nice to each other. Take care of the things that you can control. And all you can control is how you react to situations. Ciao for now.